Well, good afternoon and welcome, Ron Gibson. It's fabulous to see you again. It's been a while. And how are you doing?
Doing very good, thank you.
Good. Well, I've missed our time. I've missed our time and being able to learn with you about the legal system and what our lawful rights are. So I'm eager to begin today, and I'm going to give you the floor, and please take it, and again, welcome and thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. Again, it's always a pleasure to be on your program. I hope what I share on these that are of benefit to the people listening, because I don't want to give them a bunch of dead horses. I hope something that they can get on and ride and betterment their life, their understanding, their position, whatever it may be. So that's kind of how I view it. And I love being a teacher. I never thought I'd be one, but it's the old saying, the mechanic said, yesterday I couldn't spell mechanic and today I are one. So kind of how I feel. I never planned on doing this stuff. I never in my wildest dreams thought that.
Well, I join you with that. I didn't either.
But nevertheless, I'm here, and it's a place where God put me. So, but Kathleen, what I'd like to share with you and your viewers today is a topic very dear to my heart, because it is so misunderstood and so terribly abused. And that's the power of the sheriff. And let me say, as you indicated earlier before we went on camera, that the power of the sheriff is tremendous. If he understands, his deputies understand, and we the people understand what that power is. And having said that, he, like you indicated earlier, is our firewall between unjust actions or reactions relative to our rights and our property. And let me say, the vast majority of the American people, let me turn this phone down. Elect our elected officials for the wrong reason. And I go back to my Bible. I'm an avid student of my Bible. But it says anyone that is to be put in a position of leadership must have a servant's heart. That's number one priority for putting people, a sheriff, an elected official, up and down the scale, clear up to the president. We don't do that. What is his qualifications? Or I like the way he combs his hair. I mean, the stuff I hear sometimes makes me want to throw up. And yet we're doing it. And Albert Einstein said it best. He said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, but expect a different result. And then we wonder why in our society and our nation today, why we have such chaos and calamity and disruption and disharmony. And it's because we, the people, are not doing our job. When we elect an individual or individuals, plural, we need to watch them like a hawk. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie of Goldie Hawn called Protocol. It's about watch that movie. That illustrates what I'm trying to share with you right to the T. But somehow, I don't remember all the details of it, but what I do distinctly remember, she gets involved in politics or by some means, and it makes her madder than hell. And then one of the statements in that movie, she said, from today on, I'm going to watch you like a hawk, because they're doing stuff that nobody's monitoring. And I've said for years and years, every time there's an election and there's an incumbent running for a new term, his whole voting record needs to be mandatory to be placed. he promised this here on his campaign. Now here's what he did. Here's the next thing he promised. Here's how he voted. It would change our electoral system tremendously because we don't follow up and remember what he promised versus what he delivered. Well, that's the same thing with our sheriff. The sheriff has tremendous power. He is the number one top law enforcement individual and position in his county. And that applies to every county. And so when we elect a sheriff, we do it on the basis of so-called qualification. And then when they do something wrong, and at least for me, when I confront them with it, the answer I get to the deputies and the sheriff and the prosecutor and oh, I'm just doing my job. And I have to tell you, I don't care about their job as a primary issue. I care about their duty, because when you take a position that elected or hired as a public servant, or what is supposed to be a public servant, and we don't have public servants anymore, folks. Hate to pop your bubble. We do not have public servants. We have a non-existent rogue so-called government that is self-serving. And I'm going to go back and give you a little bit of history. Our country functioned quite well. We built an empire until 1946. And in 1946, the traitors within our government instituted an unconstitutional act called the Administrative Procedures Act. The Administrative Procedures Act was designed and implemented and put into a act of Congress and passed for the purpose of pushing the Constitution off the table. It is also designed to push common law off the table. It was also designed to create and establish and function as a criminal syndicate. That's what a corporate government is. It is not for the purpose of serving the people. It is not for the purpose of doing what's right. It's not an issue of adhering to law or creating laws. It's for the purpose of control by brute force. And boy, you better never forget that, because that's how they function. I read just the other day about an Amish family that I think they're in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, and the Food and Drug Administration is coming after them with a vengeance, and they're serving and helping hundreds and hundreds of people, and because somebody complained or got sick, they don't even know for sure that that's why they got sick. But see, it's the old saying, when I do something right, nobody remembers. When I do something wrong, they never let me forget it. And that's kind of the deal. But nevertheless, they're trying to put those people literally out of business. It's going to affect hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And I'm scratching my head going, what are we doing here? You know, we have a right to the free enterprise system, the right of commerce, and now you got government sticking their nose and infringing by force that very issue. So we better be careful. The other thing I want to mention before I go on, we started out as a nation of common sense, and that came from God's gift to us, and we call it common law. God's law is very simple. It's not complicated. It's not hard. It's not confusing. It's common sense. And we've all been given that capacity. The question is, do we use it or exercise it? And then we go along to 1946, and Congress implements the Administrative Procedures Act. And now we change that from 1946 to January 1, 1954. All of the states incorporated. They removed the state sovereignty by becoming a territorial corporation. The states are no longer sovereign. We controlled the state prior to that enactment, and now the state wants to control us. You see the switch here? 180 2-degree switch. And so as a result of that, they then created a new set of so-called law, which is not law at all, but is called statutes and codes. So that now was supposed to be the new law. That is not law. That is simply corporate rules and regulations that apply only to corporate entities or under contract to the corporate entity. So now, in the last 10 or 15 years, they had converted back over now to another, these are law, statutes, and codes. Now we're down to the danger, the real danger. And it's called presumption and assumption. The court system use it. All of the politicians use it. The whole enchilada. Let me tell you something, folks. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing to go unchecked, because now you have no rights. You have no claim to any rights. You have no protective covenants that you can bring forth in any kind. And Kathleen, you know this as well as anybody. You're and have dealt with it for years. I've dealt with it my entire legal career. So here we are now, and we go around every day and we're complaining like hell. And what happened? What's wrong? And we're pointing the finger over there and we're pointing the finger over here. Oh, the trouble's there. Everybody's in trouble. You want to find the trouble? Go look in the mirror. That's where you find the problem. The problem starts with me, because I haven't kept my elected officials or hired people within the confines of their fiduciary duty. And don't ever forget that word, fiduciary duty. I want you to look it up. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I want you to go look it up. But boy, that's a powerful, powerful word. And the principle behind it is tremendous. Now I want to get to the sheriff's issue. I mentioned to you a little earlier that we elect people for the wrong reason. Here's what the power of the sheriff is. The sheriff has the ultimate say-so of any law issues that has to do within his county boundary. One of the biggest problems that the sheriff's office has, and you and I talked about this a little earlier, that we are not keeping our sheriff accountable for what his fiduciary duty and within the power that is delegated to him. That sheriff's position is a constitutional position. And if we're going to depend and support the Constitution, we better make sure that our servants are doing the same. And here's the real problem. We elect a sheriff for whatever our reason is, but 99% of the time, if not all the time, it's for the wrong reason. My Bible says that the people that are put in position of leadership, the number one qualification is they must have a servant's heart. Are we questioning that before the election? No. Where did you go to college? How long have you been in law enforcement? That approach is really a detriment to the position that you're going to position somebody to occupy. Now, once we vote, the votes are counted, all of that, we elect him with a constitutional hat, okay? The day after he's elected, he takes that hat off and puts an administrative hat off and gets a decree from the court to go take somebody's home from them. There is no authority in law anywhere. I'm telling you, in 50 years of law, there's no lawful authority for the sheriff to do that, because now he's violated his constitutional oath, he's violated his moral code, and he has violated the rights of the people and their property and their rights. I'm telling you, folks, we better get off our duff and start putting a stop to this. Here's another real problem. It should and never was intended, now follow me here, folks, that the prosecutor should never be the one to go before the grand jury to try to get an indictment. And I'll tell you why. Very simple, but follow me. It's important. The prosecutor has one motive in mind. It is not to get to the truth. It is not to serve justice. It is not to do what's right or fair. It is to get a conviction. Are you with me? And they will distort, they will lie, they will manipulate the information to the grand jury, and the grand jury, that's all they hear is what they hear. Now you put the sheriff in the position that he's supposed to be. He's the one that to go to the grand jury. Why? Because he's a protector of the people, or supposed to be. He goes and he's the investigator. He has all of the facts. The prosecutor may have the facts, but he does not always display those to the grand jury, because the sheriff's motive is totally different than what it is for the prosecutor. Are you guys with me here? So what you have now, the prosecutor doesn't care whether that individual is guilty or not. All he wants is a conviction, because that gives him a prosecutorial record that, boy, now he'll get selected by the governor to move up to Salem or wherever the capitals are across the nation. And boy, he puffs his chest out. I got all these. He doesn't care whether that innocent man goes to jail or spends half his life in jail. That is not the motive of the sheriff. And I hope you get the difference between the two. The other thing of it is, and I'm going to tell you a story. I like stories because Jesus taught in what's called parables, and I try to do that. Don't do it as well as he does, but try to do it. We had a meeting with our local sheriff years ago, probably about 8-9 years ago, and our county here is just above the poverty level. There's not a whole lot of industry, and you have your service agencies and that, but nothing really to drive the economy. We're a timber county, we're a timber state, and the environmentalists ruined that industry. So our level of income and disposable monies and all of that is really a tight budget. Well, that affects the county because they relied upon timber revenues to run the county. Until 1965, there were no property taxes in Josephine County.
Oh, wow.
There was so much revenue from timber that we had 39 mills in 2 states and in 2 counties. Today, we have 2. 37 of them, they drove them out of business or put them out of business. So now that level of timber revenue has gone right down the toilet. So as a result of that, the sheriff was complaining about, and another thing that's really, I'm kind of jumping around here, the sheriff, they were forcing him to create his own income to run the sheriff's office rather than from revenues from the taxes or whatever means of which would support the sheriff. And I've been in opposition to that forever, because now he's in the financial business rather than in law enforcement and protective business.
Ron, so could I interrupt you for a second on that? So what I find most interesting there is, I'm in a small county, Mora County in New Mexico. And when I call the phone number that's listed for the Mora County Sheriff's Office, no one picks up the phone. The only way that I can get through to any law enforcement is to call the state police, and they will do a dispatch to the Mora County Sheriff's Department if they can. I'm not exactly sure what determines when a sheriff from the Mora County comes, or when a paid state policeman comes. Now that's very different, as you were pointing out. The sheriff is elected, and the state police, the state police are paid. They're paid by state funds.
Correct.
So here we have a blending of a department of paid personnel, and then an elected official, and all of those under him paid by the taxpayers. And it's a direct violation of our constitutional rights and our access to an elected official. It's quite egregious. Do you see that elsewhere?
We see it. I see that all the time. And
Really?
in those instances, most generally, the state police will act or claim that they now have jurisdiction.
Yes.
That's the danger of what we're talking about, because the control and the camaraderie of the people in a county is now superseded by a state agency that could give a damn less about who's in the county or their rights or their property. That's the danger here, folks. And now that we're functioning under a presumption and assumption, let me tell you, you're going to find this is going to get real, real ugly. I have people call me every single day, emails, texts. I'm telling you about the abuse that is going on relative to the litigation of the courts or the sheriff's department or the state police or whatever. The Internal Revenue Service. Guy called me this morning. They're trying to take his house. He doesn't owe any taxes. Hello? He doesn't owe any taxes. And they're trying to come and foreclose on his house. That's the abuse of power that I'm talking about. They don't care whether you have children. They don't care whether you have a place to lay your head at night. The day they kick you out and take your property, they could give a horse rat's ass about any of that.
Wow.
But like I say, never was a lion so vicious as an ungodly man or woman. Man in the Bible means mankind. Okay? So, but I want to share this story with you. I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have any?
No, you didn't. You answered it beautifully. Thank you.
Because I don't like to do that. But so anyway, the sheriff called me in, and I asked several other prominent, knowledgeable people to join. And we sat in the room for probably 20 minutes, and all I heard was all of this financial difficulty that the county was enduring. And I listened, and pretty soon I got a little bit upset of what I'm hearing. And I want to back up and interject something so that it makes relative sense. Oregon, it's called the ONC Act, 1937, and that made available to 11 timber counties in the state of Oregon so that they would receive 100% benefit other than the actual cost, but they would get the revenues from the timber harvest. 11 counties, called the ONC Act. They call it ONC lands, ONC timber, but it all came from that 1937 Act. So anyway, when the environmentalists ruined the timber industry in the 80s, then in essence, those, as I said earlier, those revenues had stopped. So the sheriff's complaining that they have no money. And so I had 20 minutes of that, and I put my hand up. I said, Gil, that was the name of the sheriff, neat guy, really neat guy. I said, I know how to solve your problem. Or I said, let me rephrase that. I said, you have the ability to solve this problem. And he looked at me and raised his head up like a deer in a headlight. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, here's how you do it. I said, you impound all of the timber, ONC timber, within Josephine County. And he pulled back and he looked at me and he said, I can't do that. I said, you most certainly can do it. He said, well, you're going to have to explain to me, Lucy, explain. And I said, you have the power of the sheriff. I said, to call into question any of the property within your county that there's a question of title. And you could see the wheels turning, but he got a blank look in his eye. And he said, Ron, he said, you're going to have to help me out here. I said, everything within your county that comes into question about ownership, you have a right to impound it and demand on a 30-day notice that whoever claims ownership to bring their title. On that basis, you're required by law, once you're satisfied that the presenting of the title is adequate, then you're to give the property back. I said, Gil, I can tell you, the United States government, the Forest Service, the BLM, the Park Service, all of this garbage has no title to that timber.
Oh, wow.
I said, these are public lands. It is not Bureau of Land Ownership or U.S. Forest Service of ownership or Department of Parks and Recreation ownership. I said, every land law ever made is under a public land law designation. We, the people, own the properties that are not been disposed of by patent. And I said, there's a case going back to 1983, I think it is, called the Hague case in Nye County, Nevada. And the Forest Service came after the Hague Ranch to run them out of business, to destroy their lives for the purpose of making a pristine recreational retreat for Forest Service high-level personnel. Okay? You see the picture here. So then Hague fought it with everything they had, and they did one whale of a job. But they had a sheriff there that was a constitutional sheriff. And the court ruled against him. The Forest Service came after him. They were trying to come. They came one day with cattle trucks and U.S. Marshals, a whole brigade of bullshit. And Hague called the sheriff. He came out, was there within about 15 minutes. And he told the U.S. Marshals, he said, you will remove your men off of this property until we get the follow-up of the next court decree. And they threatened to arrest the sheriff. And the sheriff said, be careful here. He said, if you do not disperse immediately, he said, I will call my SWAT team and we will escort you off at gunpoint. And boy, there was a Mexican standoff there, as I understand. I wasn't there, but I know the Hague family. I've talked to Ramona and the boy, but anyway, to make a long story short, they saw that that sheriff was serious, and they also understood his power. The U.S. Marshals, the state police, none of those other law enforcement agencies have any authority within a county without the approval of the sheriff. So I'm just sharing with you, and I told the sheriff about that story. I said, you have that same power. You impound that timber, you give full notice for 30 days, and at that point, I said, you release that to Josephine County. They now can put up a timber sale, and the revenues, they get 100% of it because the government is no longer involved because the ONC Act defaulted. That took away the jurisdiction of the BLM to monitor the log scale. They call it a log scale, the amount of logs that are harvested off that. And I said, now you're back to pre-1965 to where you got all the tax money in the sheriff's department. And when I explained that to him, he's still just dumbfounded. He had never heard it. Well, to make a long story a little shorter, I asked him to go to some of my seminars. And so we're driving across the Nevada desert, and I'm talking some elements of law, and we're looking at the desolate desert. And pretty soon he's driving. We took his pickup, and he looked over at me and he said, you know, Ron, he said, I wish that I would have known then what you have taught me up to today. And made me feel good, you know. He said, I would have done a whole lot of things a lot different than what I did. He said, I did not know the law.
Ron, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, and we're going to pick up in part 2. So hold on to that point. I'll see you in a minute.
Okay. Do I need to go back to the...
Yes, click on part 2. See you soon.